We are back with a Fox News alert. This morning, the UN Security Council is expected to hold an emergency meeting on the U.S. capture of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. The meeting is listed under the agenda as, quote, threats to international peace and security, and is expected to begin at 10 a.m. It comes after leaders in Colombia called for this very meeting, saying they believe the U.S. set a, quote, dangerous precedent with their actions. So here's a question. What is next for the future of Venezuela? History could point to the answer. Experts are pointing to the similarities between the U.S. capture and indictment of Nicolas Maduro and the 1990 takedown of Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega. Noriega surrendered to U.S. forces and was then flown to Miami to face drug trafficking charges. He was then sentenced to decades behind bars. Now former Attorney General Bill Barr says Maduro could suffer the same fate.
I have a high degree of confidence he'll ultimately be convicted, and all the legal arguments that have been raised really were raised during the prosecution of Noriega, which was a very parallel situation. I think he will be convicted, and I think he's looking at sentences similar to, if not bigger than, Noriega's sentence. He's committed far more crimes in my mind than Noriega did.
The question is now, will Maduro's arrest lead to the end of drug cartels terrorizing citizens, both local and abroad? Joining me now is a former DEA attaché who spent 3 years on the ground in Venezuela, coming face to face with some of these very narco terrorists we are talking about. Wes Tabor. Wes, thank you so much for joining us. You are the perfect person to talk to about this, given your very specific area of expertise. When it comes to Venezuela, what are some things that people here at home may not understand about how the government there operates?
You have to understand that when they took over Venezuela, and I say they, the party of Hugo Chavez, which Maduro ended up going even further with that, right? They wanted to do a couple things. They wanted to secure the country under the name of socialism, bring everyone in under the warm arms of collectivism, right? And then once they got in there, they started giving everyone the Heisman and started taking away their rights. And then what happened was, we had a full-on dictatorship that blew outward, right? And it was affecting the whole Western Hemisphere. But what they were doing was they were drawing in terrorists from around the world. And you could see that in the indictment when they talk about giving passports and identities to some of these terrorists from Hezbollah, Hamas. And this was increasing as we went along. And we're not just talking about narco-terrorists. We're talking about terrorists from the Middle East. And you have to remember that this government was made up of a potpourri of bad actors, you know, and Maduro is just one of them. And we have 15 or 16 of the top level cabinet members and generals indicted. And that was my job when I went there. Identify a lot of these people, target them, get them arrested, and get people that we could build a case on. And that's what we did. And it wasn't just me, of course. There were just many, many other people putting this together for many years until it culminated with this action by President Trump. Hats off to him.
Well, when it comes to just how connected Maduro is to narco-terrorism, he has been accused of purposefully trying to import Tren de Aragua members into this country to cause destruction, chaos, death. Is that true?
Yeah, listen, I wrote a book about it called Infiltrate America, Blood Routes and the Rise of Latin American Gangs. Tren de Aragua goes back to the state of Aragua, where we have one of Maduro's soon-to-be, hopefully, co-defendants, Tarek el-Asaimi, who is a known terrorist, whose father was an Iraqi Ba'athist terrorist, and he was the vice president for a while. I'm the only agent to ever have met him in Venezuela when I was there. He's a bad character. And what he was doing was, we believe, and this is coming from open source information, you can look at it now, it's in this indictment, kind of hinting toward it, providing fake backstop identities for terrorists to travel around the world. And that was great back in the 90s and 2000s. When Venezuela passport actually had some authority. Now it's not even worth the paper it's printed on, right? Yeah. But these are the types of things that they were doing. And they were allowing this permissive environment, not only allowing it, but making money off it. At the end, you had Celia Flores, the wife of Maduro. You have Nicolas, the son. And what they were doing was working hand in glove with Tren de Aragua to move those dope boats that we were blowing up in the Caribbean. That was all Tren de Aragua with the help of the son of Nicolas Maduro. So you have to look at this and say, well, this is something you guys see in the movies, right? Because it just can't happen in the real world. And you have people defending it. That's the other thing. We have 8 million displaced Venezuelans around the world, and you could see them celebrating, because they get to go home now. So, you know, these nefarious actors, if we're not careful and we don't get a grip on what's going on in the country and help them in some fashion, we're going to have that vacuum,
Wes,
and we don't want to kill by bad
and that brings me to my next question. What do you foresee happening next? Can the United States trust the vice president turned acting president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez? She's being described as deeply ambitious and a hardline socialist, just like Maduro. What do you know about her, and can the U.S. trust her?
Let me tell you, you know, a couple days ago on Fox, I said this. I have one word for her, and that is feckless. She is feckless. In fact, I call her Miss Feckless, okay? She is the same cloth that Nicolas Maduro is. Now, their constitution says, just like ours, right? You have authorities that are going to be transferred and implemented when people are taken out of office, and that's what's happening right now. But you have to remember, we have other indicted members of the cabinet. You have Padrino Lopez. You have Diosdado Caballo. These guys hold the keys to the military in Venezuela, and they're not under arrest. In fact, right now, they're plotting against this new president, right? Yeah. So we have some serious issues on the ground, and I'm sure President Trump, the agency, and, you know, DOJ and so forth, they're all looking at how can we help transition this in some fashion. I know President Trump is committed to that, so we'll see what happens.
Well, we are just at the beginning of this story here, but as Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said, and I'm paraphrasing, Maduro messed around and found out, and it appears after all that you have said that we are a safer country as a result of this. Wes Tabor, thank you so much for joining us and speaking to us this morning. We very deeply appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.